Child, I never smiled, nothing ever went right for me. Yeah, that's me as a kid, that's my stocking, Ricky. Nobody loved me, there's my family. That's my mom and that's my uncle, and I'm sitting on my grandfather's lap. I always called him the Colonel because he was a colonel in the Air Force in World War II. And he would sit me on his lap when I was a little older than this, and he had this briefcase full of paper. He would take it out, and every night he would make up a new story for me and draw pictures to go along with it. They were usually about paratroopers that landed behind enemy lines and found these labyrinths, and they would battle monsters and stuff. I thought that was so cool that he could just make this stuff up out of thin air. And I said to myself, someday I want to be able to do stories like my grandfather does. My parents were also pretty cool people. My dad was a great role model. We did all sorts of vigorous, manly activities together. That was our favorite sport. I'm still pretty good at it. But my dad did read me my first mythology book. My mom was also pretty cool. My mom was an art teacher, so she gave me my impeccable fashion sense. She used to take me to the public pool so I could show off my style and impress the ladies. I know, pretty cool. She also got me my first car. This is actually an amusement. I hit the street at an early age. No, actually, I stuck around, but I was not nearly this cute by the time I hit adolescence. That's me in 6th grade. Yeah, I was a real looker back then. My parents liked to take me out and do all this wilderness stuff, like camping. I hated it. I was always very conscious about my weight, and I didn't like to be out in the wilderness. I did like animals, however. This is me communing with a rooster. The only thing I remember about this picture is that when they took it, I was sucking in my cheeks so I wouldn't look as fat. And it didn't really work. The rooster was not impressed. Well, I would have been okay getting through 6th grade, but then in middle school, you know, the only thing I really liked to read were the things I wasn't supposed to read, like comic books. My uncles had this fantastic collection of comics, and these are some of them. And you'll notice we've got Circe the Sorcerer turning Superman into a lion. And we have Thor and Odin in the Mighty Thor comics. Already I was getting into mythology. But then something terrible happened. It was called middle school. That is a page from my 8th grade high school yearbook, and those are my teachers. Can you tell why I thought that middle school teachers might be monsters in disguise? A pretty scary bunch of folks. The only thing worse than the teachers were the other students. Those are my peers at the junior school in San Antonio, Texas. Little did I know that my future wife is on this page. That's her right there. That's Becky. And you notice how she wrote next to this guy's name, Foxy. That's not me. That's me. Nobody called me Foxy. I don't know why. The only good thing about hating middle school for me was that it made me want to retreat from reality. And that may not sound like a good thing, but back then, guys, we didn't have anything. No internet, no smartphone, no video, no cable television, no video games. The only thing I had was Pong. That was it. And so, if I wanted to retreat from reality, I had two options. One, the great outdoors. I hated that. And two, reading. I hated that too. I decided I hated reading a little bit less. So I started reading some stuff, and I actually found some books that I liked. It was called the Lord of the Rings series. That was okay. I liked that stuff. There was enough like comic books that I really dug that. Then I found out that one of the English teachers in 8th grade at my school had done her master's thesis on the Lord of the Rings. And she wasn't my teacher, of course. They didn't give me the good teacher. But I said, oh man, I gotta get into her class. There was only one problem. She taught honors English. Nobody was ever gonna put me in honors English. My grades were not that great. I tried anyway. I went to my regular English teacher. I said, I have to get into Mrs. Patz's class. I really want to be in her class. She does mythology and Lord of the Rings. And so the teacher gave me a test. One day in class, she called on me for the first time to see how good I was. She looked in the back row and was like, well, Rick, please tell the class what irony is. got this blank look on my face, and I said, irony is the fact that I can't think of the definition of irony right now. Fortunately, she bought it, and I got into honors English. And there's Mrs. Paps. She was the first person that got me writing. I wrote a story for her called Appointment with an Archangel, which was about a guy who dies and goes to heaven. She said, Rick, this is really good. You ought to try to get it published. And so we sent it off to the magazines. I thought I was going to get rich and famous. It was immediately rejected, but I kept trying. She also got me into mythology. She said, Rick, if you like The Lord of the Rings, you really need to check out the Norse dudes. Because these guys are cool, and that's where Tolkien got all his ideas. Odin, who gave up his eye for the gift of knowledge. Loki, the god of backstabbing and trickery. And Thor, of course, who not only has a really cool hammer, but he also has recyclable goats. Every day you can kill them and eat them, and the next day they come back to life again. Which is great if you like goat meat, I guess. But I love these stories. Once I got into high school, I also really got into Greek mythology. I love that stuff, and I know you're thinking, Rick, is it possible that your hair could get any longer? And the answer is yes. That's me in 9th grade. I kept a journal then because I thought that's what writers were supposed to do. There's a page from my journal in 9th grade, 1978. This is really embarrassing stuff. I talked about what girls I liked and all of that. But there was one line as I was rereading this that kind of struck me by surprise. I say, I'm really looking forward to being free from slavery at the end of the 6 weeks. I had totally forgotten that. I wasn't kidding. Back then, I was taking Latin, which you could take 2 years of in high school at that school. But one of the things they did, if you were a freshman, you had to become a Roman slave. There was an actual auction, and you had to get up there, and they would bid on me and like raise up the price, and I had to be one of the upperclassmen slave for 6 weeks. I know, right? I don't think they could get away with that now. But can you imagine? That was so humiliating. But I learned a lot about the Romans during that year. And later on in high school, I became something of a troublemaker. I had an underground newspaper that I ran off at the school's expense. I didn't tell them what I was doing, but I went in there and used their copy machine. And I passed out this underground paper that made fun of the football team, made fun of the teachers, talked bad about the principal. They could never prove it was me, so I didn't get kicked out, but that was my first published writing. I did get kicked out of history, I got kicked out of marching band, I got kicked out of math. I probably would have failed high school. I never read a single book that they gave me in English class, not one. But there was one thing that kept me in school. I met a girl. That's Becky, who I told you about earlier. We started dating in high school, and every Percy has to have his Annabeth, right? You know, if you've read the books, that Percy's, he can be pretty dumb sometimes, and Annabeth has just got to slap some sense into him. And where did I get that? Well, that's from Becky. She kept me going. We got into college. We went to UT in Austin together. And I know you're thinking, can your hair get longer? Yes! Yeah. By this time, I had still not gotten published with my short stories, so I decided, well, I'll do the other thing I love. I'll do music. I was in a band the entire time I was in college. That's how I paid my way through college. We were terrible. It was awful. I found our demo tape the other day. It's so bad. I thought I was going to put it on iTunes just for fun, but I was afraid I would break the internet. Anyway, this is how I got